expected to visit fire-damaged areas of Los Angeles on Friday, where over 100,000 people are under evacuation orders. What happens to the World Health Organization's funding after Trump's announcement that the U.S. will withdraw from the health body? We'll have a report from the White House. And how is a significant number of stolen vehicles in the U.S. landing in Africa? VOA's chief national correspondent Steve Harman has some answers. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Firefighters are battling multiple wildfires Thursday in Southern California, including a new blaze that erupted a day earlier and prompted authorities to order more than 30,000 people to evacuate. The Hughes fire northwest of Los Angeles is the latest focus for fire crews as it swelled to burn an area of more than 41 square kilometers. Forecasters warned of another day of dry and windy conditions that could make it difficult to keep fires from spreading. Nyema Pratton has more.
A new wildfire rapidly blazed through an area north of Los Angeles on Wednesday, fueled by strong winds and dry brush. In just a few hours, the Hughes fire grew to two-thirds the size of the Eaton fire, one of the two monster infernos that have ravaged parts of the city. The Los Angeles County Sheriff said on Wednesday that 31,000 people had been given evacuation orders, and another 23,000 faced evacuation warnings. The new blaze put further strain on firefighters, who have almost managed to bring two other major fires in the area under control. The California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection said about 1,100 firefighters had been deployed around Southern California in anticipation of fast-moving fires, while the LA County Fire Chief said more than 4,000 firefighters were working on the Hughes fire. Southern California has gone without significant rainfall for 9 months, contributing to the hazardous dry conditions. Rain is forecast from Saturday to Monday, which could give the area some much-needed relief.
That report was filed by Nyema Pratton of Reuters. U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to visit Los Angeles on Friday, where fires continue to burn and over 100,000 people are under evacuation orders. Ginia Dulot has more.
Richard and Bushra Mauser came back to see what just 2 weeks ago was their beautiful home of 25 years in the Los Angeles suburb of Altadena, California.
It's almost an impossible task to get in there and find anything. When you find something, it's just so melted. All the metal is melted together. I had some high-end audio equipment in there that I thought maybe somehow could have survived something, or at least partially intact. But the more I dig in there, I realize it's just, the whole thing's just one melted metal glob of junk.
The Mausers have been staying at a local hotel and are hoping insurance will help them rebuild.
We are now just living in uncertainty and a bubble, so we're just dealing with our loss and kind of, because we're still living in shock and denial. Every morning you wake up and you say, maybe that was a dream, you know, and I'm going to go back to my home. But then you come here and you see the reality.
Fire did not reach Jose Velasquez's Altadena home, so he and his family organized a donation drive for neighbors. He says that at least 400 people have come for help in the past 12 days, and that they feel like they are on their own.
We haven't really seen much government help anyway. It's all been the community stepping up to help each other. There has been no visit from the mayor, nothing, you know, so it's we feel like we're by ourselves in this. It's just the community.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass did visit some areas in Pacific Palisades, as seen in this Instagram post with her note, "We are going to do everything we can to rebuild and get Angelinos back home." President Donald Trump criticized local authorities' responses to the fire in his inaugural address this week, saying the Los Angeles fires were still burning, quote, without even a token of defense. The website for California Governor Gavin Newsom says the state leader has taken several measures to combat the fires, including ordering prepositioned fighting personnel throughout Southern California ahead of the fires and deploying more than 16,000 firefighters and other personnel in response to the emergency. Meanwhile, a new blaze, the Hughes Fire, started in the mountains north of Los Angeles Wednesday, growing fast and forcing the evacuation of 31,000 people by evening. Following Trump's visit, Southern California may get some badly needed rain this weekend, which could dampen wildfires, but stoke worries about their runoff of potentially toxic ash. Jenya Dulo, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Following President Trump's announcement that the U.S. will withdraw from the World Health Organization, the United States is expected to reduce funding to other United Nations agencies. As White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara reports, the wealthy nations are unlikely to fill the gap.
Lean times are ahead for the United Nations as the United States withdraws from international commitments, including its membership in the World Health Organization.
It was 18% of the budget in 2023. And as I said, the U.S. is the largest single donor.
On Monday, his first day in office, President Donald Trump signed various executive orders, including one to exit the U.S. from the UN's Paris Agreement, an international climate accord.
The United States will not sabotage our own industries while China pollutes with impunity.
The U.S. is the world's biggest producer of fossil fuels that cause global warming. It's also the largest financial contributor to the UN. In her Senate confirmation hearing Tuesday, Trump's nominee for UN Ambassador Elise Stefanik said that the children's agency UNICEF and the World Food Program are effective UN agencies. However, funding for others will be cut, including for UNRWA, the agency that helps Palestinian refugees.
Our tax dollars should not be complicit in propping up entities that are counter to American interests, anti-Semitic, or engaging in fraud, corruption, or terrorism.
When Trump reduced funding for many UN agencies in 2017 during his first term, European Union countries stepped up financially. But now they're focused on defense spending to help Ukraine push back against Russia's invasion, in part because of Trump's skepticism toward aid for Kyiv.
Now that the new administration in the United States has taken office, it is more important than ever for Europeans, for our two countries, France and Germany, to play their full part in consolidating a united, strong, and sovereign Europe.
Meanwhile, China is unlikely to expand its UN funding.
Chinese officials are also realistic that their country is facing some economic headwinds, and they don't have lots of spare money to throw around. So I'm afraid that there is no obvious alternative funder for the UN to turn to.
This is the second time Trump pulled the U.S. out of the 2015 Paris Agreement that aims to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels by slashing planet-warming carbon emissions. Trump's successor in 2021, President Joe Biden, had the U.S. rejoin the Paris Agreement on his first day in office. Analysts said shifting U.S. positions may make other countries take their climate commitments less seriously.
We have less emissions reduction in China or less emissions reduction, in other countries of the world. Those countries, failing to reduce emissions as a part, reflecting on the U.S. example, will create damages that will affect the U.S. economy. The damages are global.
Climate activists protested Trump's decision. Once the withdrawal takes effect next year, the U.S. joins Iran, Libya, and Yemen as the only UN countries not part of the climate agreement. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
Representative Elise Stefanik, President Trump's nominee to serve as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, faced questions at her Senate confirmation hearing. The high-ranking House Republican told lawmakers she would advance Trump's America First agenda at the international body. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson has the details.
Representative Elise Stefanik, President Donald Trump's pick to represent the United States at the United Nations, calling for accountability Tuesday.
The UN has not lived up to this founding mission, and we must demand better. I share President Trump's vision of a UN reformed by strong America First, peace through strength, and a return to this founding mission of promoting peace and security around the world.
Stefanik was elected to Congress in 2014 at age 30 and eventually became the fourth-ranking member of the House. Republican senators say Stefanik's steady hand and fierce intellect make her the right fit to advocate for the United States at the United Nations.
When many of us look at the United Nations, this body that is meant to advance values of peace and freedom and human dignity, we don't see those American values reflected. We see rampant anti-Semitism against the world's only Jewish state as it faces attacks from all directions. We see oppression and aggressive autocrats celebrated and elevated to leadership positions.
Stefanik told senators her time in Congress would inform her approach as ambassador.
The U.S. is the largest contributor to the UN by far. Our tax dollars should not be complicit in propping up entities that are counter to American interests, anti-Semitic, or engaging in fraud, corruption, or terrorism. We must invest in programs to strengthen our national security and deliver results, to increase the efficacy of UN programs.
Senator Jim Risch, the top Republican on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, agreed.
I believe it is reasonable to evaluate every UN agency to determine if what they are doing is directly beneficial to America and hold them account until the answer is a resounding yes.
UN spokesperson Farhan Haq pushed back on that assertion on Tuesday.
The United States owes $1.5 billion to the regular budget of the UN.
1.5 billion.
1.5 billion. And then between the regular budget, the peacekeeping budget, and the tribunals, the total amount that they owe to all three is $2.8 billion.
One analyst told VOA it could be difficult for the U.S. to change the 80-year-old organization.
In some of the lower institutes, we are the largest donor to the United Nations, so there is a possibility of using some of that leverage. But typically, we've been able to use that leverage only in small ways over these institutional changes.
And Democrats are concerned about Stefanik's past actions.
You have voted to defund the United Nations and its specialized agencies. Certainly, I would agree that the United Nations is an imperfect body, but the UN is also a force multiplier of American taxpayer money. U.S. disengagement is something our adversaries want, especially Russia and China.
If confirmed, Stefanik would be the 32nd person to lead the U.S. mission to the United Nations. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
Nigerian authorities say the nation's new partnership status with the BRICS bloc could unlock critical opportunities in trade, investment, and agriculture. For more on BRICS, I'm joined live from Harrisonburg, Virginia by Sombo Muzata, Assistant Professor of Political Science at James Madison University. Sombo, your reaction first on some of BRICS member nations like China and India proposing de-dollarization. Is that even feasible?
Yes, thank you so much, Esther. So if we look at the drivers, what is causing this push to de-dollarize, I think it will be easy for us to understand how probably this is going to end up. So it is the geopolitics. We see that having a greater impact in why there's this push. But then also it is the vulnerabilities that other countries have as a result of a heavy reliance on the US dollar. So based off those factors and a lot others, the push to de-dollarize has really risen a lot as a topical issue over the last few years, and particularly with the BRICS. Now, coming to your question, is this feasible? I would like to believe that, yes, this is feasible. And it is feasible if we sort of analyze the issue, not only looking at the individual members of BRICS, but looking at them collectively. And also the fact that BRICS is pretty much covering most parts of the world now.
Right, Sombo. Now, President Trump has said he plans to impose about 100% import tariffs on BRICS members. What impact would that have on the BRICS members and the momentum that they have right now to continue with what they want to do?
Yeah, that was a very, very interesting. It's a very, very interesting statement. And if we think about the gross domestic product of the BRICS countries, okay, collectively, again, it is just slightly lower, just about or slightly above the GDP of the US, okay? So I think that they are likely to continue, trading amongst themselves. It is sort of unfortunate that, the president of the U.S. is proposing 100% tariffs on the BRICS countries. Are they able to survive without the United States of America? And what other practical things, are they going to get into as they pursue their agenda? I think if they get that clarified, then they'll probably just, continue with trading amongst themselves. We have seen them trade amongst themselves, and we have seen them score some success. So I think based off that, the pronouncement from the president is really strong, and it's exciting to the U.S. base. But to BRICS, I think the world has reached a place or a point in history where they can look at the value that they bring together on the table and, the power that they have cumulatively. So let's wait and see what the 100% tariff is going to do. It might impact the U.S. negatively. That's an experiment we can see. And it might be the solution that, the other countries have been looking for, an alternative. So I think we need to approach this with, cautious optimism.
Right. So but we got to leave it there. We will explore this further because we don't know where this momentum is coming from or what's the force behind it. We'll see. Sambo Munzata is an assistant professor of political science at James Madison University. Still to come, we'll tell you where many stolen U.S. vehicles are heading. Stay with us.
Here in the United States, the 60th presidential inauguration ceremony was held just a few days ago on January 20th, 2025, with President Donald J. Trump taking the oath as the 47th president. This week on Our Voices, we discuss the highlights of the ceremony as well as the hopes and expectations for women and girls in different spheres of life in America and around the world. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, Chad's Constitutional Council is ignoring opposition calls to set aside results of last month's parliamentary elections for gross irregularities and fraud and proclaimed the ruling party of President Mahamat Idris Deby the winner. The opposition is insisting another transitional government should be formed and transparent elections organized to end the three-decade Deby family rule. Botswana's Minister of Labor and Home Affairs says the nation will no longer issue work permits to foreign teachers and truck drivers in order to protect local jobs. Pius Mukware told a group of unemployed teachers protesting in Havarone that the government already has stopped issuing permits to foreign educators and truck drivers. Israeli hostages released from Gaza as part of a ceasefire deal face a long road to recovery. Linda Gradstein explains.
3 Israeli hostages released after 471 days of captivity in Gaza were taken straight to an Israeli hospital. The young women seem to be in relatively good condition, at least outwardly. But Israeli medical personnel are prepared for the freed hostages and all those still held captive to come home with physical and emotional wounds. All bodily systems are likely affected after months spent in underground tunnels with limited air, light, and food, according to Israeli medical experts.
After such a long time, 15 months, we pretty much expect
many illnesses, both physically and mentally, actually from each and every one. It doesn't matter who he was before, okay? And what was his shape before or medical condition.
Rehabilitation psychologists like Einat Yehene say there will also be emotional scars.
Symptoms like cognitive symptoms, disorientation, emotional irritability, emotional withdrawal, disorientation in time and place, difficulty to connect with others, difficulty to show emotions.
Both psychologists and the families of released hostages are still learning how to deal with the trauma they suffered.
We have come to know a new way to hug someone, and it's by giving him space. So that's the first tip. Give them a space and let them lead the way. Give them back the control of their lives, their narrative.
Other relatives of returned hostages say they will never forget their experience, but they will hopefully learn to deal with it. Avichai Brodich's wife and 3 young children were kidnapped on October 7th from Kibbutz Kfar Aza and released in the November 2023 deal.
Sadly, it's part of our lives, and it's part of my life and part of my family's life. But, every day I thank God for what I have, and I've lived a miracle.
Some of the families of the remaining many other hostages still do not know if their relatives are alive or dead, or if they will ever be returned. They say they, too, are waiting for a miracle. Linda Gradstein, VOA News, Jerusalem.
Most people encounter Customs and Border Protection agents when they enter the United States at land, border crossing, or airports. But those agents are also responsible for inspecting goods leaving the country. VOA's chief national correspondent, Steve Herman, reports from the Port of Baltimore about a significant trade in stolen vehicles leaving the U.S. for Africa.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection has a nearly impossible assignment. Try to intercept all the stolen automobiles leaving the country. Here at the Port of Baltimore, the hundreds that officers do discover annually are mostly bound for a particular region of the world, according to the CBP's Adam Rotman.
I'd say 90 to 95% of every one of our stolen automobiles is headed to West Africa.
Auto theft is a problem accelerating across the U.S., according to University of Miami criminology professor Alex Piquero.
There are people who are stealing cars and car parts to sell them very quickly in the local markets. And then there are people literally stealing cars and literally putting them on containers and selling them, shipping them all over the world, not just to Africa, but also to the Middle East and to Asia.
CBP uses mobile giant X-ray machines to scan containers and determine whether they seem suspicious and should be opened. The manifest for this container did not list any vehicles, explains CBP Port of Baltimore Director Rotman.
It's supposed to be only household goods in there. In this example, there's at least 3, probably 4 cars in that container. This container we just opened today, the vehicle on the top here, that Honda, we've already verified through the VIN number that car is stolen. There is 2 more in the back. There's another one hanging from chains.
Law enforcement says criminals frequently rent cars for a 30-day period, drive the vehicles directly into a container, and post a fake VIN, the vehicle identification number, over the real one. The car will not be reported stolen for a month. By then, it could already be on a ship on the high seas. Rotman's team hopes to intercept such cars before they head out to sea.
We noticed that the check digit on the VIN doesn't match what's supposed to be on a Ford truck.
Authorities in some countries in Africa are now working with Interpol to try to seize stolen vehicles that managed to slip past U.S. port checks. But that cooperation is inconsistent, says Professor Piquero.
Some governments will play nicer and other governments won't. You can't search every container. That's why the security at the port is so critically important.
With so many buyers seeking a deal on a used car, often with no questions asked, there is unlikely to be a slowdown in the global traffic of stolen vehicles. Steve Herman, VOA News, Sparrows Point, Maryland.
As President Trump moves quickly to implement his agenda, especially with the signing of executive orders, Washington, D.C. is trying to get back to normal after the inauguration, with a collection of all the fencing, barricades, and security measures installed around the city for the presidential event. Standing by live on Capitol Hill to tell us more is VOA's Philip Alexiou. Hello, Philip. How is the return to normalcy plan going?
Well, it's coming along, Esther. We're in about 21-degree weather. That'll be about 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, and the crews are out really dismantling all of the fencing, which comes to about 30 miles of fencing, or 50 kilometers, if you prefer that measurement. The D.C. Department of Public Works is out cleaning up the trash, and you've got a number of crews who are really dismantling all of these fences. They basically feel like ice cubes. So They literally are working 12-hour shifts. They don't work overnight, but these are long shifts, and this will be continuing on for the next couple of days. So this is sort of coming along. So it's getting back to normal, but they got a lot more work to do.
And as the cleaning, is coming along, what is President Trump doing to help the city return to normalcy here?
Well, it's a good point. You know, the president has been very busy really since Inauguration Day on Monday, and so he is wanting things to get back to normal as well. And let me take you back to Capital One Arena when the president was signing executive orders, and one of the most important ones, at least to help the city along. Take a listen.
Sir, the next item, as you announced in your speech, is a requirement that federal workers return to full-time in-person work immediately.
Yeah, so that was the White House Staff Secretary Will Scharf making that announcement as the president signed one of many of dozens and dozens, if not 100, executive orders really during the presidential parade on Monday, and he's been moving along ever since. But, you know, it's interesting. The mayor of this city, a Democrat, is in favor of bringing workers back because so much office space is not being used. There's a lot of revenue that is being lost because of a number of businesses being closed. You know, just around here in this city block, a couple of restaurants being closed, a pharmacy is closed, a famous store in this country, CVS pharmacy, closed down just a block down the street. So vacant buildings, you've got businesses have closed, and so that's why the mayor has wanted to bring back business into the city. So, but there's getting some pushback by the American Federation of Government Employees, where there's a collective bargaining agreement underway, where there has been an agreement for government workers to add more telework, and they have telework rights. So the national president for the AFGE, Everett Kelly, points out that remote work is part of the collective bargaining agreement. So there's a lot going on, a lot of challenges to executive orders, and that's just one of the challenges going on while things are trying to get back to normal in the city. Welcome to Washington, D.C.
Welcome back to, the real work here. We do not telework, so thank you so much, Philip. Philip Alexiou, live for us from Capitol Hill. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.